Marcus stepped into the bustling downtown restaurant, hoping for a quiet lunch after a long week of work. The familiar hum of conversation and clinking silverware filled the air as he scanned for a seat. He had been to this restaurant before, and he had always felt welcome. But today something felt different. He approached the host stand. A young woman with a bored expression glanced up at him, then quickly down to her list. "Table for one?" she asked, her voice flat without looking. "Him in the eye." "Yeah," Marcus replied, trying to smile. "I'll take a seat by the window if you have one." Her eyes flickered over him briefly, and without a word she turned toward the back of the restaurant. Marcus followed her, glancing at the busy lunch crowd around him. He felt a sense of relief. Maybe this would be just the break he needed. But as they passed through the main dining room, he noticed a sudden shift in the atmosphere. A few heads turned, some with curious glances, others with not-so-subtle judgment. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it felt like every eye was on him. When they reached a table near the back, the host gestured toward a chair. "Here you go," she said, still avoiding eye contact. Marcus sat down, adjusting his jacket and looking around, but the tension in the air was palpable. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't until the owner of the restaurant, a tall white man in a black suit, walked over that Marcus realized what was happening. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm afraid we don't serve people like you here." Marcus froze, his mind racing. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't some random diner in a back alley. This was a well-known upscale restaurant in the heart of the city. He glanced around, hoping someone would step in, but no one said a word. "You should leave," the man continued, his eyes narrowing. "We don't want your kind here." The words stung, but Marcus kept his head high. He wasn't going to back down, not now, not after everything he had been through. But as he stood up, ready to confront the man, he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. In the far corner of the room, seated quietly at a table with a few others, was none other than Keanu Reeves. The Hollywood star, the man who had earned the world's respect through his kindness and humility, was sitting there quietly observing the entire situation. Marcus didn't know it yet, but the presence of Keanu Reeves in that moment would change everything. What will you do if you're suddenly humiliated in public, in front of everyone, and you have no idea that a famous figure is watching? Before we dive deeper into this intense story, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button to keep following this journey. Trust me, it's about to get even more dramatic. Marcus had never been one to shy away from a challenge. In fact, life seemed to throw them at him non-stop, and he had learned to adapt, to overcome. But it wasn't always that way. Growing up in a small working-class neighborhood in the outskirts of Chicago, he had known from an early age that the world wasn't always fair, especially for someone like him. He often remembered the days of walking home from school, feeling the heat of the sun on his back, and hearing the distant sounds of laughter and shouting. But there was also something else, something far more sinister, that lingered in the air. Racism wasn't something Marcus had been told about. It was something he had felt, from the looks in people's eyes to the whispers that followed him wherever he went. His father, a proud and determined man, had taught him to stand tall, to walk with purpose. "You can't let the world define you, son," his father used to say. "You have to define yourself." But even his father couldn't shield Marcus from the painful realities of being a black man in America. The day Marcus was accepted into the army was the day he thought he had found his true purpose. The military, he believed, was a place where anyone could rise above their circumstances, where rank was earned, not given. It was supposed to be a place of camaraderie, where skin color didn't matter. But even there, he found that wasn't entirely true. He served 3 tours in Iraq, facing unimaginable horrors, losing friends, witnessing destruction, and seeing parts of the world that most people couldn't begin to comprehend. And while the battlefield had taken its toll on him physically and mentally, it was the homecoming that would change him forever. Returning to civilian life wasn't easy. Marcus had been trained to fight in wars, but no one had prepared him for the war inside his own mind. The scars from the battlefield were evident, his nights haunted by nightmares, his days filled with an overwhelming sense of detachment. He had trouble connecting with people, even his own family. His wife, Janelle, tried to understand, but the distance between them grew with every passing day. His daughter, Maya, was too young to fully comprehend why her father had changed, why he couldn't simply pick her up the way he used to. But there was something Marcus knew he couldn't change: his commitment to his family. No matter what. They were his anchor. They had to be. Jason, his best friend from the army, had been there for him throughout his struggles. Jason had always been the optimistic one, the one who encouraged Marcus to keep going, to stay in the fight, even when Marcus felt like giving up. "Don't let the world beat you down, Marcus," Jason would say, offering him a beer after a long day, trying to lighten the mood. "We fought for something greater than ourselves, you can't forget that." But now here Marcus was, sitting in a restaurant, still trying to hold it all together. After everything he had been through, after all the sacrifice and pain, he had hoped that he could finally have a peaceful meal, just a simple moment of normalcy. Yet here he was, fighting a different battle, one he didn't expect, the battle for dignity and respect. The words of the restaurant owner, Mr. Bill, echoed in his mind. "We don't serve people like you here." They were more than just words. They were a painful reminder of everything Marcus had been fighting against his entire life. And then, just when he thought it couldn't get worse, he caught sight of Keanu Reeves sitting across the room. Keanu wasn't just another celebrity. He was a symbol of something Marcus had always longed for: kindness, compassion, and fairness. Over the years, Keanu had built a reputation for being a genuinely good person, someone who didn't care about fame or status, but cared about people. In a world where people often struggled to connect, Keanu had found a way to do it. But Marcus had no idea that Keanu Reeves had already taken an interest in him. He didn't know that Keanu had witnessed everything, the humiliation, the injustice, and was about to make a choice that would change Marcus's life forever. As Marcus stood there, his mind racing with frustration and confusion, he couldn't help but wonder, how much longer would he have to fight this fight? How much more could he endure before he broke? And what would happen if just this once someone actually stood up for him? Stay tuned, because this story is about to take an unexpected turn. But first, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There's much more to come. Marcus didn't know what to say at first. The words from the restaurant owner, Bill, hit him like a brick. "We don't serve people like you here." It wasn't the first time he'd encountered this kind of prejudice, but something about the way Bill said it, with such casual disdain, made it feel even worse. For a split second, Marcus felt paralyzed. His legs were shaking, his mind racing, to process what had just happened. Was this really happening? Was he really being humiliated in front of everyone in a place where he should have been treated like any other paying customer? He glanced around the room, hoping someone would step in, but no one did. In fact, the silence was almost suffocating. It was as if the whole room had frozen, awaiting the next move in this uncomfortable drama. Bill stood there, arms crossed, waiting for Marcus to either back down or leave. There was a smug look on his face, as if he knew that he held all the power in that moment. The air felt thick, and Marcus could feel the eyes of the other customers on him. They weren't helping. They weren't even speaking up. Marcus opened his mouth to say something, to fight back, but the words caught in his throat. What was the point? What could he possibly say that would change the mind of someone like Bill? His entire life had been spent fighting for respect, fighting for acknowledgement, but it always seemed like the same battle. Time after time, he had to prove his worth, prove that he deserved the same treatment as anyone else. But at that moment, all he could feel was the weight of a lifetime of struggle crashing down on him. "You heard me," Bill continued, his voice growing colder. "You're not welcome here. Now leave before I call security." The humiliation burned in Marcus's chest, but the anger was quickly starting to rise. This wasn't right. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. He had fought in wars. He had sacrificed his body, his sanity, all for the sake of freedom, only to be treated like this. He had fought for a country that claimed to stand for equality, yet this was the reality he was living in. Marcus's fists clenched at his sides, his teeth gritted. He wasn't going to just leave quietly. He had fought for his dignity too many times to let this slide. "Why don't you show me some respect?" Marcus's voice was calm, but underneath there was a simmering fury. "You don't know a damn thing about me or my life. But if you're going to throw me out for no reason, then I'll go. But not before I make sure everyone in here knows what you just said." He took a step back, but as he did, something caught his eye, something unexpected. Across the room in the corner, sitting quietly at a table, Keanu Reeves had been watching the whole interaction. Marcus hadn't even noticed him at first, but now there was no mistaking it. The actor, the man known for his kindness and humility, was observing what was happening, his expression unreadable. The moment their eyes met, something clicked inside. Marcus. He wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. Keanu stood up slowly, and the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He walked over to where Bill was standing, his every step measured, deliberate. There was no panic in Keanu's movement, no hesitation. He was calm, steady, but there was an undeniable intensity to him. Bill turned to him, clearly surprised by the approach. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to maintain his posture, but the confidence he had moments earlier was now wavering. Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at Marcus, and for a brief moment their eyes locked. It wasn't just a look, it was understanding, recognition. Keanu knew what Marcus had gone through. He could feel the weight of the injustice. And without saying a word, Keanu was making a choice. He turned his gaze back to Bill. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Keanu said quietly, but with a firmness that was impossible to ignore. "This man has as much right to eat here as anyone else. If you can't treat him with respect, then you don't deserve to run a place like this." Bill scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Oh, come on, who are you to—" Keanu cut him off with a single calm gesture. "I don't care who I am, I care about what's right." The room was silent now. People were watching, waiting. The tension in the air was suffocating, but Keanu didn't back down. He stood there unwavering, as though daring Bill to try to argue further. Bill's face reddened, but something in the room had shifted. People were beginning to murmur. Some were nodding, others seemed uncomfortable, but no one was moving. No one was defending Bill anymore. They were all witnessing this moment, the moment that Marcus might finally be seen for who he was, a man deserving of respect. "You will apologize," Keanu continued, his voice cool but resolute. "You'll apologize to Marcus, and you'll change how you treat your customers from now on, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of place this is." The weight of Keanu's words seemed to hit Bill harder than anything Marcus could have said. Slowly, the restaurant owner's bravado began to crack. Bill looked at the other patrons, his confidence faltering. For a moment, it looked like he might back down. "Fine," Bill muttered, his eyes still on Keanu, and then he turned to Marcus. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. You can stay." But the damage had already been done. Marcus had heard the apology, but it didn't make things right. His pride had been wounded, his dignity assaulted in front of a room full of strangers. Still, as he stood there, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief wash over him. Keanu had stepped in. Someone had finally had the courage to say what needed to be said. Someone had finally stood up, and maybe, just maybe, Marcus wasn't as alone as he had thought. The tension in the room seemed to dissipate, but the effects of the confrontation lingered in the air like a thick fog. Bill, the owner, stood at the front, still visibly shaken by Keanu Reeves's intervention. He muttered something about needing to rethink his policies, but his words were hollow, the weight of the situation too much for him to bear. Marcus, still standing by the table, felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to lash out, to call Bill out for his behavior, to make him truly understand the gravity of what he had done. But another part of him was just exhausted. He had been fighting for dignity for so long, and this moment, felt like a bittersweet victory. Yes, Keanu had come to his defense, but what about the countless times Marcus had stood alone? What about the lifetime of silent struggles? Before he could respond, Keanu turned to him. "You all right?" His voice was calm, genuine, like a friend checking in on you after a rough day. There was no grandeur to his tone, no celebrity attitude, just a simple, caring question. Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond. Keanu Reeves was standing right in front of him, and for a moment he almost couldn't believe it. The actor, the man who had been an icon of kindness and compassion, was here, speaking to him like an equal. I'm fine, Marcus said, his voice sounding rough, even to his own ears. But that was something. Keanu smiled softly. I know that feeling, he said. Sometimes it takes someone else to stand up when you can't. You did what you had to do. Marcus gave a small, incredulous laugh. It didn't feel like I did much. I was just about to walk out of there. I get it. It's not easy, Keanu replied, his eyes intense yet understanding. Sometimes all it takes is a moment. One person speaking up, one moment of courage, and everything changes. That phrase lingered in Marcus's mind as Keanu continued, speaking, with the quiet wisdom that had earned him such admiration over the years. I don't know what you've been through, Marcus, Keanu said, but I can tell you're someone who's had to fight your whole life just to be seen, to be treated like a human being. I've seen it in too many faces to count. Keanu's words struck deep. For the first time, Marcus felt like someone truly understood the weight of his struggles, someone who wasn't just offering empty words of sympathy. Keanu was speaking from experience. Listen, I don't want to drag you into anything, Keanu said, his voice shifting slightly. But I know how it feels when a moment like this, something that's supposed to be just a passing inconvenience, ends up becoming a turning point in your life. The truth is, it's not about today. It's about what you choose to do next. You can let it eat away at you, or you can turn it into something that propels you forward. Marcus took a step back, still processing the gravity of Keanu's words. It wasn't just about this restaurant, about this moment of humiliation. It was about something bigger. This encounter, though painful, could be the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where he didn't just endure life's injustices, but actively fought back against them. Keanu's eyes softened as if he could sense Marcus's inner turmoil. I can help you with that, Keanu continued. I've seen a lot of things, and I've worked with a lot of people who've had to overcome the same struggles you're facing. If you ever need someone to talk to or any advice, just know that I'm here. The words felt surreal. This wasn't just an actor trying to do some good PR. This was a man offering real, genuine support, a lifeline in the middle of what had been a lifetime of pain and suffering for Marcus. Thank you, Marcus managed to say, the words coming out more quietly than he intended. His voice trembled slightly, but he didn't care. This wasn't about keeping up appearances anymore. It was about accepting that there were moments when someone else's kindness could light the way forward. Keanu clapped him on the shoulder. You got this, man, he said, one step at a time. As Keanu walked back to his table, Marcus stood there for a long moment, his mind racing. What had just happened? A few minutes ago he had felt completely defeated, humiliated. Now he felt like something inside him had shifted, like the ground beneath him was solid again, like he had something to stand on. It was almost too much to process. The restaurant owner, Bill, was still standing awkwardly by the host stand. His attempts to continue managing the place seemed weak, as if the event had drained him of any remaining confidence. Several patrons had already started to leave, and others were murmuring amongst themselves. Marcus took a deep breath, realizing that this was his moment. Keanu Reeves had given him the courage to stand up, to realize that what he did today wasn't just a reaction to an injustice. It was part of something larger, something that could inspire change. Marcus walked toward the door, past Bill, who now seemed too embarrassed to look him in the eye. He didn't need to say anything else. The apology had been offered, but it wasn't enough. The change had to come from within this place, from within its people. But Marcus wasn't waiting around for that change. He was going to make sure it started with him. As he stepped out into the street, the cool air hit his face, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Want to find out what happens next? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The journey is far from over, and things are about to get even more intense. As Marcus stepped out of the restaurant and into the chilly night air, he found himself in a haze of conflicting emotions. His chest still burned from the humiliation, but now a different feeling was creeping in, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Keanu's words echoed in his mind. One step at a time. He didn't know where this moment would lead him, but somehow he felt like he had just crossed a threshold. But just as Marcus took a deep breath and began to walk toward his car, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, surprised to see a message from Jason, his old army buddy. "Hey, man, I saw what went down at the restaurant. Are you okay?" "So good." Marcus hesitated for a moment before responding. He didn't know how to explain everything, how he'd felt in that moment, how Keanu had intervened, how something inside him had shifted. But then he realized that Jason would understand. He always did. He typed a quick reply. "Yeah, man, I'm good. Something crazy happened. Keanu Reeves was there, and he stepped in." A moment later, Jason's response came through. "Keanu Reeves? The Keanu Reeves? Dude, that's insane. What happened?" Marcus leaned against his car, glancing at the restaurant's windows one more time. He could still feel the tension in the air, but it was fading now, replaced by something new, a sense of clarity. His anger was still there, but now it was tempered by something more important. The realization that he wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not with people like Keanu willing to step up. He typed out a long response to Jason, recounting everything. How Bill had humiliated him, how Keanu had stood up for him, how something in him had shifted. As he pressed send, he looked around, noticing the quiet of the street. It was almost like the world had slowed down for a moment, just long enough for Marcus to gather his thoughts. And then, without warning, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from his wife, Janelle. "Marcus, I've been thinking about everything. The kids miss you, I miss you. We need to talk about how we're going to move forward. Please call me when you can." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Janelle had been trying so hard to reach him, but Marcus had been so wrapped up in his own struggles, his own battle with the world, that he'd pushed her away. He'd ignored the fact that she needed him, that his family was waiting for him to be present, to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. He stared at the phone, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He had spent so long fighting for respect from the world, from strangers like Bill, but now he realized that the most important fight was the one he had been avoiding, the fight to be there for the people who loved him most. The realization hit him hard. He could no longer be the man who was distant, the one who carried his burdens alone. If he truly wanted to heal, to move forward, he needed to rebuild what he had neglected. His phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Jason. "Hey, man, you there?" Jason's voice crackled through the speaker. "Yeah, I'm here," Marcus replied, his voice quiet. "Listen, I've got a lot to think about, a lot of things I've been running from." "Yeah, I get it. But hey, don't forget, you're not in this alone. You've got people, man, you've got me." Marcus nodded, even though Jason couldn't see him. The weight of his words settled in. He wasn't alone. Not now. Not ever. After the call, Marcus stood still for a few moments, his gaze fixed on the quiet street before him. It wasn't just about the injustice at the restaurant anymore. It was about his own inner turmoil, the things he had hidden from himself for so long. The night was growing colder, but Marcus didn't feel it. He had a long road ahead of him, and he knew that the road to healing and understanding wasn't going to be easy. But he had made a choice. He would move forward, slowly, but surely, and just like Keanu had said, one step at a time. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. Marcus couldn't shake the events of that night, the way Keanu had stepped in, how his own emotions had shifted from anger to clarity, the message from Janelle. Everything seemed to be building up to a turning point. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was standing at the crossroads of change. The weight of his past, the years of silently enduring, of fighting battles no one else could see, had begun to lift. But it didn't lift in the way he expected. It wasn't an immediate sense of relief. Instead, it was like the beginning of a long process, a process of healing, of rethinking how he viewed himself and how he interacted with the world around him. That afternoon, he found himself sitting on his front porch, staring out at the street as he waited for the kids to come. Home. He'd spent the morning working on a few things around the house, taking care of the small tasks he had been neglecting for months. The small things that seemed insignificant, but had piled up. The kids would be home soon. He could already hear their laughter echoing down the street, and a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. His phone buzzed again. "Marcus, I know you're busy, but I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about us, about how we've been living in the same house but feeling like strangers. I don't want that anymore. Let's talk tonight." "Okay, I love you." The message from Janelle was short, but the weight of it hit him harder than he expected. There was no anger in her words, just a quiet plea for connection, for reconciliation. It reminded him of the conversation they had been avoiding for so long, the one where they would both have to acknowledge the ways they'd grown apart, the ways Marcus had been emotionally distant, the ways Janelle had been trying to reach him, trying to pull him back in. He had been so focused on the injustices of the world, so wrapped up in his own battles, that he hadn't noticed how much he distanced himself from the people who loved him the most. Marcus didn't know what to say. What could he possibly say? There were years of silence, of unspoken pain to contend with, but he knew he had to start somewhere. He picked up his phone and typed a response. "I'm here. I'm ready to talk. I love you too." A few minutes later, he received a text from Jason, his old army buddy. "Hey, I know things have been tough lately, but I just wanted to remind you that you've got this. I'm here for you no matter what." Marcus smiled. It was a simple message, but the support behind it was everything. Jason had been there for him through the toughest moments of his life, and now, more than ever, he needed to be there for himself. The kids came running up the driveway, their laughter filling the air as they rushed toward the porch. For a brief moment, Marcus closed his eyes and let the sound of their joy wash over him. This was the reminder he needed. The people he loved were still here, still waiting for him. He hadn't lost them, but he had to be present. He had to do the work. The evening went by slowly but peacefully. They had dinner together, something Marcus had been making more of an effort to do recently. He wasn't just physically present anymore, he was actually engaging. The kids talked about school, their friends, their day-to-day lives, and Marcus found himself listening in a way he hadn't in years. Janelle was quieter than usual, but there was a softness to her that Marcus recognized. It was as though she was waiting for him to open up. Finally, after the kids had gone to bed, Marcus and Janelle sat on the couch, the silence between them almost suffocating. "I'm sorry, Janelle," Marcus said quietly, breaking the stillness. "I've been so wrapped up in everything, my own anger, my own feelings of injustice, that I've ignored you. I've ignored us. I didn't mean to, but I did. And I'm sorry for that." Janelle looked at him, her eyes searching his face. There was no anger there, just sadness, the kind that comes from being left alone in a marriage, even when you're not physically alone. "I know, Marcus. I know you've been through a lot, but I've been here waiting for you to see it, to see me, to see us." Marcus nodded. He could feel the weight of her words in his chest, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't try to brush them off. He accepted them. He needed to. "I'm here now," he said softly. "I'm going to try. I'm going to be here for you, for the kids, for us." Janelle smiled faintly, the edges of her lips curling up in something that resembled hope. "That's all I ever wanted, Marcus, just for you to be here, really here." They sat in silence for a while, but this time the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a quiet understanding, a step toward healing. As Marcus sat there, he thought, back to the restaurant, to Bill, to Keanu, to everything that had happened in such a short span of time. He had been humiliated, but he had also been seen. He had been standing at the edge of something much bigger than a restaurant or a moment of injustice, and now he was beginning to realize what it was. This wasn't just about revenge or about confronting the racist bigots of the world. It was about healing. It was about rebuilding what had been broken. It was about finding himself again and doing the work to become the man he wanted to be, not just for the world, but for the people who mattered most. In that moment, Marcus knew something deep within him had changed. He wasn't the same man who had walked into that restaurant. He had learned something about resilience, about the importance of standing up, not just for himself, but for the people he loved. And with that realization, he felt a sense of peace, the kind that had eluded him for so long. Thanks for following Marcus's journey so far. But there's still more to come, more lessons, more challenges, and more growth. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can stay with us for the rest of the ride. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Marcus. Life slowly started to return to some semblance of normalcy, but it wasn't the same normal he had known before. There was a subtle shift. Something inside him had changed. He didn't just feel different. He acted different. He found himself more present with his family. He listened to Janelle without trying to solve her problems. He watched his kids laugh without worrying about what the world outside thought. They were his world now, and he wasn't going to miss any more moments. The restaurant incident had become a distant memory, but it wasn't forgotten. Every time Marcus walked past the place, he couldn't help but think about how far he had come. From the humiliation to standing up for himself, to the unexpected support from someone like Keanu Reeves, it had all led to this. One afternoon, after work, Marcus and Janelle went for a walk around the neighborhood. It was something they used to do regularly, before everything had become so strained. The conversation was light, easy. They talked about everything and nothing, plans for the weekend, the kids' latest antics, and even their favorite shows. It was simple, but it felt right, like they were rediscovering each other. As they walked, Janelle stopped and turned to Marcus, her expression soft but serious. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about everything too," she said, her voice calm. "About how far we've come, about how much you've changed, and I'm proud of you, Marcus. I'm proud of you for finally seeing what you've been missing and for being brave enough to fix it." Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat. Her words meant more than he could put into words. He had been so caught up in his own battle for respect, for validation, that he hadn't seen how much it had affected the people closest to him. But now, things were different. He was seeing them, truly seeing them, for the first time in a long while. "I'm proud of me too," he said with a smile, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of us. I won't let this slip away again." They continued walking side by side, the sound of their footsteps blending with the quiet hum of the evening. It felt like a new beginning. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Marcus sat down at his desk with his phone in hand. He had been meaning to do this for a while now, reach out to someone who had become an unexpected source of strength. He typed a quick message to Keanu Reeves. "Hey, Keanu, I just wanted to say thank you again. You don't know how much your support meant to me that night. It gave me the strength to stand up for myself and for my family. I don't know if you ever hear this enough, but you're making a difference in people's lives, and I'll never forget it. Thank you." He hesitated for a moment before hitting send, wondering if Keanu would even read it. He wasn't expecting a response, just a way to express his gratitude. Minutes later, a reply pinged on his screen. "Hey, Marcus, I'm glad I could be there for you. But really, it was all you. The strength was always inside you. You just had to recognize it. Take care and stay strong." Marcus smiled as he read the message, his heart swelling with a sense of peace. Keanu was right. The strength had always been inside him. It just took a little help to see it. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. There were still battles to be fought, injustices to confront, but for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone. He had his family. He had his friends, he had his own strength, he was ready. So what about you? If you were in Marcus's shoes, what would you do next? Would you fight for what's right, or would you walk away? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your own journey with us. And if you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's always more to come. Your story, your strength, is just as important as Marcus's. Keep moving forward, always. The following weeks marked a shift for Marcus. He was no longer the man who walked into that restaurant, humiliated and defeated. Instead, he was learning what it meant to live with purpose, to reclaim his life from the confines of resentment and silence. The time spent with his family, the small moments of reconnection, and the steady rhythm of rebuilding his marriage with Janelle, These things were becoming his new normal. But despite the peacefulness of home, Marcus still carried a quiet, simmering urgency within him. He could feel the pull to do more. It wasn't just about confronting individual injustices like what had happened at the restaurant. It was about making real, lasting change for himself, his family, and his community. One evening, as Marcus and Janelle sat down for dinner, their conversation veered in a new direction. Over the past few weeks, they had both been more open, more honest about their fears, their hopes, and what they wanted for their future. That night, as they enjoyed a simple meal of spaghetti and garlic bread, Janelle set her fork down and looked at Marcus with a serious expression. "Marcus," she began softly, "I've been thinking. I know we've talked about everything that's happened, but I don't think we can ignore the fact that you've always felt this fight within you, this desire to make a difference. And I think it's time for you to do something with it." Marcus raised an eyebrow, unsure of where she was going with this. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hesitant. "I mean, all the pain, the anger, the struggles you've faced. You've been carrying this for so long, and I think it's time for you to use that energy to make a difference, to help others. You've been through so much, and you've learned a lot. I think you could be someone who can inspire people, give them the strength to speak out and stand up, not just for yourself, but for others who are fighting similar battles." Marcus stared at her, his heart racing. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about making a bigger impact. It was just that he had always been so focused on healing himself, on regaining his strength, that the idea of helping others had felt like a distant dream. "I've been thinking about it, Janelle," he admitted, his voice quiet. "I've thought about speaking out, helping others who are facing the same kinds of things. But I don't know where to start. It feels so big, so overwhelming." Janelle smiled gently, her eyes full of understanding. "You don't have to have all the answers, Marcus. You just have to take that first step. You've already started. Look at how far you've come." Marcus thought about this for a moment, letting her words sink in. He wasn't sure what the future held, but something inside him told him she was right. He had been given the chance to heal, to reclaim his life. Now, it was time to help others do the same. The following day, Marcus sat down with Jason at their favorite coffee shop. They hadn't seen each other in a while, and as always, Jason was quick to jump into their usual banter. "So, what's been going on with you, man? You've been quiet lately," Jason asked, leaning back in his chair. Marcus looked at his friend, feeling the weight of his decision coming to the surface. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what you said before, about making a difference. I think I'm ready to do something with all of this. I want to get involved, help people who've been through what I've been through." Jason raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What do you mean? Like some kind of charity work?" "Maybe," Marcus replied, "but I'm also thinking about speaking out, sharing my story, my journey, maybe even starting something of my own, an organization or program to help people who've faced racial discrimination, who feel like they're invisible or silenced. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but I know I need to try." Jason nodded slowly, a grin slowly forming on his face. "Man, I knew you had it in you. You've been through so much, and now you're ready to turn it around and help others. I can't think of anyone better to do it." Marcus smiled back, a sense of determination filling him. For the first time in years, he felt like he had found his true calling. Not as a victim, not as someone defined by his struggles, but as a person who could create change. That evening, as he sat down to discuss his plans with Janelle, she could see the fire in his eyes. He had found his purpose, and she could see that he was ready to take the next step. "I think it's a great idea, Marcus," Janelle said, her voice full of encouragement. "You've been through a lot, and your story could help so many people. I believe in you." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. It wasn't going to be easy, he knew that. But he also knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where he wasn't just surviving, but thriving. Not just healing, but helping others heal too. As the days passed, Marcus began researching how to start his initiative. He reached out to organizations, attended community meetings, and even began writing articles and blog posts to share his journey. Slowly but surely, He was building something bigger than himself. Something that could help others find their voice, just as he had found his. The journey was just beginning, but Marcus no longer felt lost. He had found his way, one step at a time, and with each step, he was becoming the man he had always wanted, to be strong, determined, and ready to make a difference. What would you do if you had the opportunity to make a change in someone's life? Could you take the first step? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected for more. This story may be over for now, but remember, your journey is just beginning. Marcus was beginning to see the fruits of his labor. What had started as a simple idea, speaking out, sharing his story, was now transforming into something much more significant. His voice was gaining traction, people were listening, and more importantly, they were responding. It all began with his blog posts. He shared personal stories, moments of struggle, resilience, and hope. His first post was raw, vulnerable. It detailed the humiliation he had faced at the restaurant and the lessons he had learned. He wrote about his marriage, the struggles he had with Janelle, and the moment he realized that healing wasn't just a personal journey, it was a shared one. He spoke about the anger, but more importantly, he spoke about the healing. He spoke about hope. Within days, his blog began gaining traction. Comments flooded in. Stories from people who had faced the same struggles, people who had been silent for too long, waiting for a voice that resonated with their pain. It was the beginning of something big. One morning, as Marcus sat in his small office sipping coffee and reading the latest comments, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered anyway. "Hello? Marcus? This is Mia Lewis from the National Civil Rights Organization," a voice said on the other end. "I've been following your blog, and I have to say, your story is powerful. I think what you're doing is incredible. We want to help you." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "Wait, what do you mean?" "We want to partner with you," Mia continued. "We've been looking for someone who can speak to the real experiences of the Black community, someone who's lived through it, someone who understands the struggle. We want to amplify your voice. There's an opportunity to expand your platform, to take your message further, and we want you to be a part of it." Marcus sat back stunned. He hadn't expected this. He had started his blog to process his own experiences, to heal, to speak out. But to have an organization like the National Civil Rights Organization reach out, it was beyond anything he had imagined. "I'm honored," Marcus finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought it would get to this point, but if this is what I think it is, I'm in." After that phone call, things moved quickly. The organization set up interviews, media appearances, and public speaking events. It was overwhelming at times, but Marcus pushed forward. Every new platform, every new audience he reached was an opportunity to help someone, to make a difference. One evening, after a speaking event in a nearby city, Marcus and Janelle sat together in their hotel room. They were tired but content, the weight of the day's events hanging in the air. Marcus looked over at Janelle, a smile tugging at his lips. "You were amazing today," she said softly. "You were so real, so raw. People need to hear your story." Marcus smiled and leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. "It's hard to believe this is real. It feels like everything changed in an instant. I didn't set out to do this. I just wanted to find a way to heal. And now you're healing, and helping others heal along the way," Janelle replied, her voice full of pride. "You're doing something that matters." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Marcus traveled from city to city, sharing his story, meeting with activists and participating in community outreach programs. He even began collaborating with local schools, talking to young people about racial inequality, the importance of speaking out, and how they could start making a difference in their own lives. But no matter how far Marcus traveled, or how many people he met, he never lost sight of what mattered most: his family, the life he was building with Janelle and their kids. They were his foundation, his reason for everything. One Sunday afternoon, after a particularly difficult week of traveling, Marcus came home to find his family gathered in the living room. The kids were on the floor, playing with their toys, while Janelle sat on the couch with a warm smile on her face. "We've been talking," she said as he walked in. "The kids and I think it's time for us to do something together. We want to support your work, Marcus. We want to help you. Help others." Marcus felt a swell of emotion as he sat down beside her. "What do you mean?" "We're thinking of creating something," Janelle said. "A family project. We can work together to give back to our community. Maybe start a scholarship program for kids who want to go to college, or an outreach program for underprivileged families. Whatever it is, we're in this together." Marcus was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the gesture. For so long he had been focused on his own journey, his own pain, that he hadn't fully realized just how much his family wanted to be part of his work. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them working together to make a difference. "I love that idea," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me. We're in this together." From that day forward, Marcus, Janelle, and their kids began working on their family project. They set up a scholarship fund, focusing on giving young people the tools they needed to succeed. They held community events to provide mentorship and resources to families in need. The work was hard, but the reward was immeasurable. It wasn't just about writing blog posts or giving speeches anymore. It was about real, tangible change. What do you think? Do you have a passion for giving back to your community? Have you ever wanted to create a lasting impact? Share your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. And remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. There's always more to come. Your journey, your impact is just beginning. Months had passed since Marcus and his family had launched their community project. The scholarship fund, mentorship programs, and outreach efforts were growing, touching more lives than they could have ever imagined. What started as one man's journey to reclaim his dignity had transformed into a movement, one that extended far beyond Marcus himself. Through his blog and speaking engagements, Marcus had become a beacon of hope for those who felt marginalized and voiceless. The ripple effects of his work were evident in the lives of the people who wrote to him, sharing their stories of change and resilience. And as his platform grew, so did the sense of purpose that guided him. One evening, as Marcus and Janelle sat on their porch watching the sunset, he reflected on the incredible journey they had taken together. From that day in the restaurant, humiliated by a racist owner, to now, a leader, an advocate, and a father leading his family in a mission of justice and change. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Marcus said, his voice soft but full. "So I wonder." Janelle nodded, squeezing his hand. "We really have. And look at what you've accomplished. Not just for yourself, but for all of us. For everyone who needed to hear your story." Marcus smiled. "It's crazy how it all started, isn't it? I never thought standing up in that restaurant would lead to this, helping all these people. I've learned that you don't have to have it all figured out to make a difference. Sometimes it's just about taking that first step." Janelle's eyes softened with pride. "And you've done that in the most powerful way. You didn't just reclaim your life, Marcus. You've given others the chance to do the same. You've created something that will live on long after we're gone." Marcus sat in silence for a moment, processing the depth of her words. It wasn't just about the work they were doing. It was about the impact it would continue to have. The scholarship fund they had established would empower young people for generations to come, providing opportunities for those who otherwise might have never had them. The mentorship program was helping people find their voices, just as Marcus had found his, and the stories that people shared with him, those stories would echo in his heart forever. That night, after dinner, Marcus sat down at his desk to reflect on the past few years. He opened up his journal, something he hadn't done in a long while. Writing had always been his way of processing, of finding clarity in the midst of chaos, and tonight he had a lot on his mind. He began writing, "I've learned that healing is not a destination, but a journey. And that journey doesn't end with us. It's a legacy that we pass on. The shame I felt that night in the restaurant, it's no longer mine to carry. It's not who I am anymore. I am a father, a husband, an advocate, and most importantly, a man who understands that the struggle for justice is not just personal, it's universal. My story is not unique, but it's mine, and I will keep telling it, because I know there are others out there who are fighting their own battles, who are afraid to speak up or afraid to hope. They don't have to do it alone. We don't have to do it alone. He paused and closed the journal, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. His journey had come full circle, from the humiliation to the anger to the healing. It had all led him to this moment, surrounded by the love and support of his family, making a difference in the world. But there was still so much more to do. Marcus knew that. There would always be more battles to fight, more lives to touch, and more voices to lift. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The next morning, as he walked into the kitchen, Janelle was sitting with their kids, who were excitedly talking about a school event they were looking forward to. Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude as he joined them, the warmth of their laughter filling the room. He was no longer just a man who had suffered. He was a man who had healed, who had found purpose in his pain, and he was just getting started. As we wrap up Marcus's journey, I want to ask you, what is the next step in your own story? What are you doing to make a difference in your life and in the lives of others? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation together. If you've been inspired by Marcus's journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your voice matters, and we're all in this together. The journey doesn't end here, it continues with you.